DreAllDay.com.
Man, you couldn't be in a better place at a better time because you are tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve is nowhere to be found. But we put all this together and we add on a little bit of personal initiative. Actually, let's make it a lot of personal initiative. This is that go-getter energy. Now, you ever known a go-getter type of individual? You ever felt like you were, at least in a moment, being a go-getter type of person? The type of person, that just goes and makes things happen. They don't wait for something to happen or hope or look for something to happen. They just go make it happen. Wherever or whatever the situation, whenever it is, they just make stuff happen. We're going to make you that type of person. We call that personal initiative. Now, we put all these together: discipline, confidence, mental toughness, personal initiative. And what you get is the mindset, the method, and the podcast known. Also the book. If you haven't read the book, go get it. It's called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day. Welcome to the show. Today's topic is what to do. Let me give you some instructions here. What to do when the person in charge is playing favorites and you're not one of them. All right, now, if they're playing favorites and you're one of them, then listen, you don't need my help. All right, you're already good. You're already getting all the help you need from the person in charge. But what about when the person in charge plays favorites? Meaning, when I say plays favorites, I mean they're showing preferential treatment to certain other people in your organization that is not merit-based. Meaning you may be outperforming or better than or doing your job more precisely than another person in the organization, but the person in charge seems to favor other people over you, even though you are outperforming those individuals. Have you ever experienced something like this? Maybe you've heard of someone talking about something like this. Maybe you're in the midst of this situation right now. Hell, maybe you're the person in charge and you're doing it right now. Because listen, human beings are human beings. We don't get into all of that. Everybody's human. And being human means we're not robots. Meaning we're not always going to treat people based on merit. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And when it comes to performance, when it comes to being better, when it comes to just doing a job at a higher level than another person, often that's a purely subjective observation, right? It's not just a black and white, well, look, I did this, you did this, that means that I'm better. Oftentimes it's not that simple. So what do? This is for the person who has someone who's a superior, whether that be a boss, coach, parent, supervisor, business owner, and you feel that person is playing favorites and showing favoritism to a person who's not even doing better than you are. It's kind of unfair. Maybe it's really unfair. Maybe you're really exasperated at this point. You don't know what else to do. So you turned on the Work on Your Game podcast. You made a great decision. Now, this concept here was birthed from my many dealings and conversations with athletes, especially in a sport like basketball, which is a team sport. But at the same time, there are a lot of individuals who feel like they could or should be doing better than they are. And actually, in basketball, this challenge of feeling like the person in charge is playing favorites to another person, it is no more prevalent in any other sport than basketball. Even if we think of other sports, like I don't know too much about hockey, so I can't touch on that one. But you think of a sport like baseball, or even a sport like football. The thing that makes those two sports different from basketball, even a sport like track and field, or again, I don't understand or know the game of lacrosse or soccer well enough to speak on it, but let's say track and field, baseball, football, all of them are very different from basketball in one distinct way, in that in track and field, you have different events, right? So I could be a sprinter and you could be a distance runner. We're on the same team, but we don't even do the same thing. So if the coach likes you more than they like me, I'm not even thinking of that comparison because we don't even do the same thing. So I'm not even comparing myself to you because I have no reason to do so. We got two completely different jobs. In football, I could be playing on the offense, you could be playing on the defense. So I might not even know you, let alone thinking about, is there a comparison between how the coach treats us? In baseball, one of you could be an infielder, another an outfielder, a pitcher or a catcher. We don't have the same position. So the thing that I'm saying, in these other team sports, and we'll take track and field out of it because that's not exactly a team sport except for the relay races. But in football and baseball, they are team sports. You play as a team, but everyone has a defined position. Everyone has a specifically defined role. So you're not actually competing with everyone else on the roster. You're maybe competing with a few other people who play your same position. But in basketball, even though there are positions, I mean, we have back court, you got wings, you got front court now in this new quote-unquote positionless basketball. Even when we had 5 well-defined positions of point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center, anybody can do anything in basketball, meaning anybody can dribble if they have the ability to. Anybody can shoot. Everybody has to play defense. Anybody can rebound and pass. Anyone could do anything in the game of basketball, which means everybody's technically competing with everybody. When it comes to who's going to get the most shots, there's no one position in basketball that guarantees you're going to get shots. In football, there's only one position where you get the ball and you throw it. That's the quarterback. So the wide receiver doesn't get mad that one of the quarterbacks gets to throw more passes than he does, because the wide receiver's job has nothing to do with throwing the ball. The running back doesn't have people envying him who play defense because they're like, damn, he gets the ball so much, because they're playing defense. They know that that's not part of the job. But in basketball, anybody could do anything. So often I'm giving you all of this, I'm framing this so all of you understand, those of you who are not in basketball, understanding why I hear from so many athletes who are looking to other players on their teams. I'm not talking about the opponents, their own teammates, and feeling like this teammate is not as good as me, yet the coach seems to favor this individual over me, and I don't quite understand why that is, because according to the player, and this according to damn near every player who has this challenge, I'm a better performer than this player, or I'm at least just as good as this player, but I'm not getting the same opportunity as this player, and I believe it's because some bias that exists in the mind of the coach. So today we're going to talk about what do you do in such a situation. Now again, as I got this idea from hearing from many basketball players with this challenge over the years, you don't have to be a basketball player to have this challenge. You can have this challenge in an office building, in a volunteer organization. You can have this challenge being amongst your friends or amongst your associates. How do you deal with this? I want to speak to it from an athlete perspective today, but understand that you could be in a boss, supervisor, parent, any type of dynamic where someone's more quote unquote in charge than you are. You feel like you're not getting a fair shake. And many of the elements that I address today, I want to be clear, they have been addressed in other episodes, by the way. Many of them, many of the elements, and in many other episodes. So I would suggest, as you're listening to me talk, if there's any topic that I bring up here that you may or you would like to hear me go a little bit deeper on, I may have already done it. So go to dreallday.com/podcast, where you can see the full archive of the show, and you can pick and choose through those episodes. Now there are over 1,000, over 1,100 episodes there. So if that's a little bit too gargantuan of a task for you, then I would suggest you join the game group, where we have those categorized, and based on the categories in the game group, I actually have special sections for particular topics and episodes so that they are chosen for you. You don't have to go look for them yourself. But let's get into today's topic, which is what to do when the person in charge is playing favorites that obviously is not working in your favor. Point number one, let's get something on the table right here. All right, everybody plays favorites. I'm not here to tell you. See, you might have thought that I was going to come in here and tell and console you, right? And tell you how, you know what, you're right. The coach is playing favorites. The coach is maybe not noticing your skill. The coach is maybe not giving you the fair shake that he or she is giving to everyone else. But I want you to understand something. Every human being, I'm not talking about every coach, every person plays favorites in life. All right, so I'm talking about me. I play favorites. You play favorites. We all play favorites in life. And when I say playing favorites, let's get a definition of what that means. That means we can look amongst a group of individuals and we decide there are certain ones that we're going to show more attention to. We like them a little bit more. We're going to invest our resources into them a little bit more than we do other people who are also available and maybe also would love to have those same investments. But we decide to give our investments to a certain group of individuals instead of certain other people. Everybody does this. Males and females. We usually play favorites with those we are attracted to, do we not? Salespeople, who do we show favoritism to? We show favoritism to the paying customers as opposed to the browsers and the freeloaders. Any of you have a dog? Who do the dogs play favorites to? With the people who supply the dog food. Sports coaches, you know who sports coaches play favorites to? I know there's a lot of coaches who listen to this. Who are your favorites, coaches who are listening to this right now? Usually the best players, right? We play favorites with the best players. I'm not a coach, but if I was, excuse me, who would I play favorites with if I was a coach of a sports team? The best players. Why is that? Because they're the ones who help me win games. All right, so this is a basic human practicality, ladies and gentlemen. We all play favorites all day, every day, and we just don't call it playing favorites. We call it sometimes being objective or stating facts. Listen, bullshit. No human being is completely objective. We all think that we are, but none of us is completely objective all the time. Most of what we call quote unquote facts these days, often they're opinions that are dressed in emotions and sprinkled with just enough truth that we have something in there to defend ourselves with. So when you point a finger at another person for playing favorites or being biased towards another person or against a certain other individual, listen, you're noticing in them what just as equally exists in you. But I want you to get this point clear that when you notice someone else playing favorites, yeah, they are playing favorites. And if you were to look at your own self, if you were to step outside of yourself and watch yourself objectively as best you could, you would notice that you play favorites too. We show favoritism to people who will help us achieve our goals, whatever those goals happen to be. How many podcasts are there out there in the podcasting app that you're listening to this on right now? How many other podcasts exist? Right now, at this moment, you're showing favoritism to the Work on Your Game podcast. Why? Because you like it. Because there's a topic that you want to hear about. When you turn on your computer and you go to a certain website, listen, there are billions of websites in the world. You're showing favoritism to one particular website at a time. Why? Because that website has something on it that has drawn your attention. We can only give attention to one thing at a time. So we show favoritism to whatever is going to serve our purposes, at least in that moment, in every area of life. So if your coach is showing favoritism to certain players on your team, it just might be. I want you to just entertain the possibility that it might be because they're the best performers. And maybe you are good enough to be one of those performers. Maybe you're even better than some of those quote unquote best performers, but maybe you just haven't shown it yet. Maybe you haven't made it clear yet. Maybe you have not done so consistently just yet. Let's keep those in mind as we move on to point number 2. Today's topic is what to do when a person in charge is playing favorites. I want you to always remember who's the boss. All right, shout out to Tony Danza. Some of you know what I'm talking about there, but always remember who's the person in charge. Always remember who the boss is. The person in charge, ladies and gentlemen, let me just to remind you of something that you should know, but maybe you don't think about too often. In this world of these democratic times that we live in, the person in charge does not need to see things your way. They do not need to have the same opinions that you have, nor do they need to agree with your perspective. They don't need to do any of these things if they don't want to. Now, why is that? Because they're the person in charge. Because they're the boss. That's the way it works. All right? Any of you has a parent at home or had a parent at home? You may have had, I don't know, if you grew up the way that I grew up, maybe you had a parent who had no problem letting you know this. All right, clear. I'm talking about verbally, to your face, letting you know, listen, this is the way that it is. And it's not about whether you agree or not. It's not about if you see things the same way. Not about if you like the decisions that have been made here, because listen, I'm in charge. And that's the way that it's going to go. And if you don't like the way that it goes, listen, when you get grown and when you can pay your own bills and pay rent and the things parents like to say, some of you know what I'm talking about, then you could be in charge and you can make your own rules. And eventually you got to that point and you did. Maybe some of you are not yet at that point, but you are counting down the days till you do get to that point. I remember watching the TV show The Prophet. I mentioned this before, a guy named Marcus Lemonis. He goes into businesses that are really in trouble, in financial trouble, and are in danger of having to close the doors of their business. Marcus writes them a check to save them from they're deeply in the red financially, so he saves them from whatever situation that they're in. He also gives them enough money to actually get the business back on its feet, and he decides to invest in a renovation of the business. So he gets them streamlined. Usually it's almost every time it's a brick and mortar business. There's a physical location to the business. So he'll redo the way the warehouse or the storefront is set up and get the business back in shape. And hopefully that business is successful and everybody makes money. The owners make money. Marcus, of course, as an investor, makes money. But when he writes that check to those business owners, mind you, he's walking into a business that he has no interesting. I mean, no, he doesn't know who they are before he walks in. I mean, he reads about them because they apply for the show, but he has no idea who these people are. He hasn't met them. He has no money invested when he first walks in. When he puts his money in, no matter what percentage of the business he purchases, he always gives them the check with a contingency. He says, listen, if you take this money from me, in which I'm going to save you from your dire financial straits, and I become a partner in this business, I want you to understand that even though we're 50-50 partners, or even though I own 25% and the three of you each own 25%, so we're technically all equal, I want all of you to understand that if you take my money, I'm in charge. He makes it clear from the very beginning. I'm going to be the boss. I'm going to make the decisions. I'm going to make some decisions that you probably disagree with. I'm going to sacrifice some of your sacred cows, basically some of the ideas that you've had for a long time. I'm going to kill off those ideas. We're going to do something completely different. You're not going to like it. It may be uncomfortable for you, but I want you to understand, if you take my money, I'm going to do that and you're not going to stop me. Do you understand? And he makes sure, and they get this on camera every episode, and he makes sure, looking them in their eyes, making sure that they're cool with this before they take the money. Now, they always say that they're cool, but we know as soon as he starts doing stuff, they get not cool with it. But then he reminds them, oh, remember what you told me when you took my money? That you understood that I was in charge? I'm in charge. I'm telling you that to tell you this. The person in charge is the person who gets to call the shots. So if you disagree with their ways, that's all right. I'm not telling you to stop disagreeing with their ways. If you think that what they're doing is wrong, that's all right. I'm not telling you to change your mind and agree that those things are right. What I'm telling you is the same thing that maybe your parents told you or are telling you right now. Listen, they're in charge. And that's just what it is. And you have to adapt to the fact that you're not the one in power in that particular situation, at least for that time being, however long you're going to be a part of that group. So if the person in charge plays favorites, and the way that they play favorites is not working for you at the moment, maybe working really strongly against you, my response to that is, so what? You're not in charge. You always have an option, though. I want to be clear, you always have options. I'm not here to tell you why you should be depressed about the situation. Let me tell you what option you have. You have the option of not being there if the situation is truly impossible. If you really believe the situation you're in with the person in charge is a truly impossible dynamic, you always have the option of leaving that situation. In episode number 1000, I'm going to refer you to a few episodes here. Episode number 1014. It's a lot of episodes. We talked about what we want from our bosses, from our coaches, from our leaders. Any of you who is a boss, coach, or leader, if you didn't listen to episode 1014, please do so. Episode number 562. How do you deal with a negative coach or boss if you happen to have one and you think that they really are that, or just to make sure it's not you? If you really think it's them, listen to episode number 562. Episode number 1096 and also episode number 714. I interviewed two bosses, two coaches, people who are in charge on a basketball team. That was Christian Crudelli, who's an overseas pro basketball coach in Valencia, Spain. And that was also Wes Pfeiffer, who is a college basketball coach. Listen to both of those episodes where I talked about the dynamic between coach and player, and they both talked about their philosophies around that. So the second point is understanding the person in charge, and if you don't like the person in charge, go find a new person to be in charge, or hey, put yourself in charge. Point number 3. Today's topic is what to do when the person in charge is playing favorites and it's obviously not working in your favor. You're not one of those favorites. Point number 3 is this. Understand that all of life, actually, before I even say that, in sports especially, and especially in basketball, I don't know how it goes in other sports. I know I have a lot of people who listen to the show who are in other sports outside of basketball, but in basketball especially, wow, I mean, it's crazy. So many athletes like to talk about the fact that it's highly political. I talk to coaches and they tell me, listen, the coaching industry is a very political industry, meaning is often more based on who you know than actually how good you are. And sometimes that bears itself out when someone gets a situation or an opportunity that maybe they weren't good enough to get, and then when they get out there to perform, it becomes obvious. And as a player, listen, it can be very political. You can be better than another player, but that player is ranked higher than you, or that player gets more playing time than you, or that player makes a team that you don't even make, or that player gets an offer to play on a team that never even reached out to you. You don't even know that team knows that you exist. It can be highly political in the basketball world. I'm sure this happens in football. I'm sure it happens in baseball. I don't know any other sports closely enough to even say anything about it, to even speak to it. But those of you who are involved in those other sports, I'm sure you can agree that those things can be highly political. We know that the business world can be extremely political. I'm in the business world now. I can tell you it can be very political in certain aspects. When you're dealing with certain types of companies and certain industries especially, it gets highly political. The more people involved, the more political it is. And if in any way there's any type of government involvement, then it becomes even more political. It becomes sometimes toxically, is toxically a word? Toxically political. If it isn't, I just made one up. But I want you to understand something. All this stuff that I'm telling you about things being political, all these areas being political in sports and business, all of life, ladies and gentlemen, is political. It's one big political campaign, all of it. And I'm not saying that as a negative thing. I'm saying that as a this is what it is thing. Same way that I told you, always recognize who the boss is. Life being political, this is just how life is. The reason why life is political is not because of who won a certain election or because of social media or because of people just being idiots. None of those is the reason why life is political. Life is political is because, let me say it one more time. Life is political because human beings are social creatures. And when you have socializing, not socialism, but socializing between humans, politics occurs. The saying goes that as soon as you put 3 people in a room, you're going to get politics. Accept the fact that politics exists, and instead of being mad at politics, instead of standing on the outside of the political game and pointing at the people who are playing the political game and saying what idiots, they're so nasty, they're so dumb, why they're all being so political, why can't it just be based on merit? Instead of standing outside of the ring and pointing at the idiots who are inside of it playing the political game, what you need to do is accept the fact that all of life is that game, and you need to get in the damn game. You need to get involved. You need to lace your shoes up, get yourself warmed up, drink some water, and get in the game. I was sitting at a Starbucks about 3 weeks ago here in Miami, and I was sitting outside, and there were 3 young ladies who were sitting at a table about 3 or 4 tables over from me. Me and those young ladies were the only people sitting outside of the Starbucks at this point. It was like the middle of the afternoon, and they were having this conversation. Now, I don't have daughters, and I'm not around young ladies this age much, but they're having this conversation. They're quite loud. I had an AirPod in my ear, but they were so loud that I could hear a whole lot of what they were talking about over whatever was playing through my AirPod. And one girl was saying this, that she was explaining to her friends that she had a decision to make. She had to choose between doing one thing for one of her friends and doing another thing for another one of her friends. And these girls are probably about, I would say about between 15 years old, high schoolers, I guess that age is. And as the girl is explaining, she says this, she says out loud, she says this in such a way that she wasn't joking, she was in a very serious tone. She said, I'm gonna lose a friend no matter what choice I make. If I do this, then this girl's gonna be mad at me. And if I do this girl's gonna be mad at me. And she was explaining this to her friends, not even asking them to help her. She was venting. She was letting them know that this is the problem that I'm facing. This is the dilemma that I'm facing. No matter what I do, somebody's gonna be pissed off about me. And I'm thinking about that little anecdote there to let you know that even if you're 14, 15 years old in high school, who knows what the hell they were talking about, you're dealing with politics. That's politics. But she was just explaining it right there. No matter what choice she makes, somebody's gonna be pissed off. And in life, that's kind of how it goes, especially when you get into a position of having power. A position of power is where you get to make decisions that affect other people. Usually somebody's not gonna be happy because you can't please everybody at the same time. Any of you ever dealt with that? In episode number 131, I talked about how to make politics work in your favor. And also in episode 747, why and how you need to start being political ASAP. So any of you who have thought that you need to avoid politics or stay out of political things, or you know somebody who is being political, maybe even bragged about being political, and you turned your nose up at them, like you can't understand how somebody can be so dumb as to get involved in politics, you need to change your mind. All right, listen to episode number 747 and become a political creature immediately. Why? Because politics, the definition of politics, if you didn't know, is people working to defend or advance their own self-interest. That's what politics means. I'm gonna say that definition one more time because some of you, again, look at politics. I've heard many people talk about politics. They'll say, well, I wasn't able to get this opportunity because it's very political, or I couldn't get on this team because everything's politics, or, I've been in this spot for this amount of time and I haven't been able to get to a better spot because it's all politics. I don't want to get involved in the politics. Everybody's being all political and stuff like that. Listen, all of life is political, people. If you consider yourself to be a non-political individual, that could tell you a whole lot about why you have not gotten to the level that you could be at right now, because you refuse to be involved in politics. Get involved in politics. All right, that's the game. If you're going to be dealing with other people, there are going to be politics. That's how it works. You can't avoid it. There's no apolitical situation or system that you're going to be able to make up, or some utopian society where nothing is political and everything's based on merit. That doesn't exist, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, listen, this podcast is called Work on Your Game. My whole brand is called Work on Your Game. So yes, you do need to work hard. You do need to have game. You do need to perform. And in many ways, how hard you work, how much game you have, and the way that you perform will affect your outcomes. But understand, that's not the whole game. And I've said this before. It's not the whole game just to work hard. It's not the whole game just to be good. It's not even the whole game just to perform. Because you need to take your work and your goodness and your performance, and you need to make sure the right people see it from the right angle at the right time in the right way. And you need to come recommended from the right person in order for you to get to the right space. And any of you who has, let's say in the last year, you've gotten yourself to a new level or gotten yourself into a new space, you're nodding your head vigorously right now that you understand. It wasn't just your hard work. It wasn't just you being good. It wasn't just you performing. All those did exist. But you needed to be in front of the right person in the right way with the right light shining on you from the right angle in order for you to get to where you're at. If I'm wrong, somebody let me know I'm wrong. I'll wait. The definition of politics, again, is any individual who is taking action to defend or advance their own self-interest. Every one of us defends and advances our self-interest every single day. Who doesn't defend or advance their own self-interest? Everybody does. So if you are not a quote-unquote favorite of the person who's in charge, it could be possible that you are not able to become one. You might not be able to get there. Maybe for whatever reason. Maybe they don't like people who look like you. Maybe they don't like people who are from your neighborhood. Maybe because they don't know your dad and everybody else, he knows their dad. You're not going to get a chance to get to be one of those favorites. But maybe you can be at least okay. Maybe you can get out of the doghouse, if you sharpened up your people skills. So I'll give you 3 suggestions for doing so. Sharpening your people skills, that is. First of all, you need to read a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. The book is about, actually, I don't even need to tell you what the book is about. That's a great book title. How to Win Friends and Influence People. If those are 2 things that you think can help your political game, then you need to read the book. Second thing you can do is take my people skills course at dreallday.com/people. The third thing you can do is read the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Now, the 48 Laws of Power and How to Win Friends and Influence People seem on the surface they're 2 books that are completely in conflict with each other, but they're actually talking about the exact same concepts, just from different angles. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends, he talks about it from the angle of, again, I don't have to explain that. The title says everything it needs to say. 48 Laws of Power explains what I've already tried to explain to you here in this episode and in many other episodes. Sometimes somebody has power that you just don't have. And the fool fights against power that they can't beat. That's what the foolish person does. The foolish person is the person who says, all right, this coach or this boss has more power than me. They have all the say so, and they're not doing what I want them to do. So I'm going to try to bang heads with this person. I'm going to be in conflict with this person. I'm going to not like this person. I'm going to let it show that I have a problem with this person's decisions. And all that does for the fool is bury them even deeper in the situation that they're already in. That's what the foolish individual does. And I'm going to say that maybe some of you who are listening to this right now have been doing this. You've been banging your head against a concrete wall trying to break the wall. All right, that ain't going to work. Okay, so what I would suggest you do is read these 2 books that I mentioned already. And the 48 Laws of Power, the reason that I mentioned this book is because it explains from a more, what's the word that I could use here? A more practical point of view, how power works. And when I say practical, it's not just going to tell you the good, but it's also going to tell you the bad. is not just going to tell you what you can do to help yourself, but also how other people may be doing things to help themselves at your expense. You know the first law in the 48 Laws of Power? It is never outshine the master. And that doesn't necessarily mean be better than them or get more attention than them. It means if there's a person who has a position of authority over you, the worst thing you could possibly do is offend this person while you still need to work for them or be under them or be, within their sphere of influence. That's just a stupid thing to do, because now you're just shooting yourself in the foot. And some of you athletes have been shooting yourselves in the foot with your coaches. Some of you employees have been shooting yourselves in the foot with your bosses. That's not a smart thing to do, because all it's going to do is get you deeper and deeper buried in that doghouse, like we say in sports. The 48 Laws of Power help you understand how power works, both for you and against you, and how you can step your own power game up. It not only tells you how to deal with this superior underling relationship, but also tells you how to make it work for you when you're in a position of weakness, when you're in a position of someone else being stronger than you. And the worst thing you can do is try to fight against it, because you ain't going to win. Now, let's recap today's topic, which is what to do when the person in charge is playing favorites and you are not one of them. Now, while this concept came from sports, this can apply to anyone who's dealing with a boss, a parent, a supervisor, anyone who has influence and power over you or has a lot more than you, and you're in a similar lane than that person, and somehow, some way you need to make it work with them. Understand that many of the elements today that I've addressed are also in other episodes at dreallday.com/podcast, or in the game group, where I go into deep dives on more of these subjects, more of the roadmaps to actually employ these tactics that I'm giving you here, and also where we categorize all the episodes of this podcast, because there are so many that you ain't gonna go look through 1,100 episodes to try to find one. But anyway, that's again at the game group. We'll get to that in a minute. Point number one, understand that everybody plays favorites in life. That includes me, that includes you. We play favorites with the people that we're attracted to, with people that we like. If you're a salesperson, you play favorites with the people who spend money because they buy your products. If you have a dog, your dog plays favorites with the person who usually supplies the dog food. Why? Because they're the people who help us move forward. They're the people who help us advance our agendas. The sports coaches, you play favorites with the best players on your team. Why? Because they're the ones who help you win games. That's how you keep your job, and that's how you move up and get a better job. This is basic human practicality, okay? None of us is objective. None of us is always, quote unquote, stating facts. All we're doing is trying to advance our own agendas. And there's nothing wrong with advancing your agenda, because if you're not interested in advancing your agenda, why you listen to a podcast called Work on Your Game? Point number two, always remember who's the boss. The person in charge, whoever that boss is, does not need to see things your way, have the same opinion as you, nor do they need to agree with your perspective, because they're the boss. So if they play favorites and is working against you, listen, you're not in charge. So you could always leave, but you could also listen to episodes number 1014, 562, 1096, and 714, so you can learn about dealing with the person who's in charge instead of bumping heads with them, because your head's going to break first. Point number three, all of life is political, ladies and gentlemen. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just a thing. Accept the fact that life is political and get into the political game. I told you I was sitting at a Starbucks. I listened to 14 and 15-year-old girls. They were talking about the political problems they had in their lives. The girl said, whatever decision I make, somebody's going to be mad at me. And I don't think they were talking about running a business or playing a sport. They were just talking about dynamics between people. As soon as you put 3 people in a room, you're going to get politics. There are 8 billion people in the world, ladies and gentlemen. That's why there are politics everywhere. Definition of politics is people working to defend or advance their own self-interest. Everybody does that. If you're not doing that, then you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. If you are not a favorite of the person who's in charge wherever you are, you may not be able to become one. Maybe they just decided that they don't like you, but you can at least not be the least favorite. Or you can at least not be in the doghouse. 3 suggestions for that. Read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Read it twice. The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Read that 3 times. And take the People Skills course by Dre Baldwin. You have lifetime access. Take that 1,000,000 times. Now, what's going on in the game group? I told you already that we do deep dives on these things. So the stuff that I talk about on this podcast, what I do is, I've given you a lot of, you take every podcast that I've done and all the things that I've told you, things that you can do, ideas that you can have, ways that you can change your thinking. We're talking in the tens of thousands. What I do is go into deep dives into how to actually do these things, roadmaps to actually make these things real. Not just the idea, not just the surface topic, not just the anecdotes, but how to actually make it real and apply it. Game group, there are 3 things you remember about it by order of priority. So if you only remember 2, remember the first 2. You only remember 1, remember the first one. It is discipline. Mental discipline and physical discipline, which leads to creating and enacting strategies which produce results. So if that's what you're looking for in any area of your mental game or your business game, and your business could be a sport, your business could be outside of sports, that's what's going on in the game group. You can get all information about that at dreallday.com/game group. And again, we take all these podcasts, which I talked about, that are numbering into the thousands now, and it's just going to keep going. We organize these by category and based on specific topics that get covered in the game group. You'll get more stuff that comes with those. Again, that's all in the game group. Work on your game, dreallday.com.